What is going on, everybody? It's Jason from Jiu Jitsu Five-O back with another episode of On the Wall, our new podcast here at Jiu Jitsu Five-O. This podcast is brought to you by Ice Cold Coors Light. No, it's not. That was a lie. They have not paid me any sort of money or sponsorship dollars. And Coors Light is in no way, shape, or form associated or affiliated with the Jiu Jitsu Five-O podcast. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about today's topic. So I titled this episode, "Just because you can doesn't mean you have to or that you should." And we're going to talk about some specific examples as it relates to police use of force. And where this idea came up was from a video that I had posted on our Instagram account about a week ago, where I took like a 30-second clip from an in-person class that we taught a while back, where someone had asked a question about a scenario-based training exercise that they were doing at their police department, where they walk into a room, there's a role player on top of the officer wearing a red man suit or whatever with hands around the officer's throat, and the person asked me, like, what are some options aside from like shooting the person? What are some other options if I just wanted to tackle them off of my partner? I'm a smaller officer. I don't think I can like muscle them off, but I just wanted some other options. So that's what I was addressing. I showed just a quick kind of arm bundle where you collapse both arms, drive forward, pretty easy, pretty effective, even for smaller folks. So I posted that, and I made a point in my caption to say, this is one of many options, including deadly force, including a lot of different things that you can do. This is an option. However, the internet did internet stuff like it does, and the video got a lot of attention. It has over like 200,000 views and a bunch of comments. And to be honest with you, I don't really read a lot of comments. I try not to. I just like to put out what I feel is good content, and hopefully other people find value in it. That's always my goal when I put out technique videos or answer people's questions, whatever. But sometimes if I have a video like that gets a bunch of attention, I'll read through some of the comments just to kind of see, what people think about it, if they're adding any sort of like constructive criticism or whatever. But like I said, the internet does what the internet does sometimes. And I saw a lot of comments that I think are, cause for concern. All right. So just because we have the legal authority to do something doesn't mean that we are legally required or obligated to do that thing. And this relates specifically to police use of force. And we see it all the time in different incidents where force is maybe escalated because the officer didn't know what to do, didn't have any training to fall back on. Scenes get to be really chaotic when they maybe could have been handled a lot more quickly and efficiently and safely had there been some level of training. Now, that's not for every single scenario, obviously. And I'm also not saying that if you are in a deadly force situation, not to use deadly force. It's not at all what I'm saying. But I'm going to use this particular video in this scenario as an example for this episode. And we'll talk a little bit more about some different training points that come out of it. And if you're listening to this, the audio version of this as a podcast, you can go back and if you follow us on Instagram, you can find that video, and maybe I'll post a link to it here on the video portion of this podcast. But so that scenario, a lot of comments. People are saying things like, I would immediately shoot that person in the head. I saw a comment, contact shot to the head. I saw comments, I would soccer kick their face until their head came off, right? You hear stuff like this, and a lot of times you instantly know that either the person's probably not a cop, or that they have this need to put something out there to feel better about themselves, or tell everybody how tough they are. I could probably do another entire, episode on the psychology of internet comments, but that's for another day. This particular incident, the scenario is, again, you walk into a room, someone's on top of your partner, they have their hands around their throat. What do you do? One option would be to use deadly force, right? So like any deadly force situation or any use of force situation for that matter, the answer is it's going to depend. It depends. It depends on the totality of circumstances, you know, your capabilities. Who is it that's on top of your partner? So this video really it sparked a lot of, you know, debate, I guess you could call it, and comments and all of this stuff. But if we think more logically, right? I think there's a need to think more logically versus just quickly react to things, especially if you are working the street. Most of you probably know this, but I think if we're just quick to react and we say, well, this thing's happening, therefore I must respond in this way, you're causing yourself a lot of problems. There's a potential for a huge potential for problems to come out of that way of thinking, and it's also why I think, you know, a lot of people fail FTO is this idea that I remember, you know, I was a field training officer for several years, and whenever we got a new recruit in and I was training them on the street, I almost immediately knew whether or not they were going to make it through FTO or make it as a cop, and not for the reasons that you would think. Now, some of them failed for the reasons that you think. They just probably shouldn't have been hired in the first place, right? For lots of reasons. But specifically, one of the things that I really started to notice as I trained more and more new recruits was that guys and gals that came in that had this sort of black and white mentality of, if X happens, then I must respond with Y. If A happens, then I do B. And there was never really any sort of thinking beyond that. And I would tell them, sometimes A happens, and you might have to go all the way to letter, you know, W in the alphabet before you find a solution to that particular problem. You might go to A to W, back to D, and you try a lot of different stuff until you figure out what it is that's going to work. As this relates to police use of force, if you are involved in an incident and you don't consistently train, you're going to show up to an incident, and the training that has like really been happening across the country in defensive tactics rooms for years has been, if the person does this, then we pull out our taser and we hit them with the taser, they fall over, end of scenario, everybody wins. Well, anyone who knows anything understands that like fights don't work that way. Things are dynamic, and you know, on that same note, we do ourselves a disservice by doing these scenarios where we don't ever introduce any new variables. We should be introducing new variables to the scenarios so cops can react to different things within the same type of call, I guess you could call it. But instead, a lot of times what I've experienced and seen happen is that here's the scenario and this is it. You go into the room, we're looking for a specific type of response. If you don't do that, we'll have you do the scenario again, right? And that can go on forever. And I don't think anyone really gets any sort of like value from that kind of training. But I digress. Let's go back to this example about the video I posted, and whether or not, you know, we should respond a certain way just because we can. So if you walk into a scenario like this, role player bad guys on your partner, there were a lot of assumptions that were made in the comments. And again, I don't think we're thinking logically about this before we're quick to react and just respond and saying what we would do. In that particular scenario, deadly force could be an option. If you walk into something where someone's on top of your partner trying to choke them, obviously deadly force, right? Now, who is it that's on top of your partner? Is it a big, strong person that has the means to actually kill this person? Or is it a 15-year-old kid with mental issues and you walk into the living room with his family there, he overpowered your smaller partner, and the family is yelling at the kid, "Get off him, Johnny! Get off him, Johnny!" Are you going to walk up to that person and you know, shoot them in the head? Probably not. If it is, you know, if you walk into a situation where an 8-year-old kid is out of control and he grabs a butcher knife out of the you know, kitchen and runs at you with it, is that technically by law, by definition, is that a deadly force situation? Sure. Are you going to use deadly force there? Probably not. So just because you're legally authorized to use a particular level of force does not mean that you're legally required or that you are obligated to use that level of force. There are other options. And obviously, I preach consistent training all the time. That's kind of like my mission of Jiu Jitsu 5-0 and why I started it, was to help cops train more consistently so they can be proficient at what they're doing as it relates to hands-on skills on the street. Um, so one of the most underrated benefits of consistent training, I think, is that you learn options for lots of different situations and scenarios, because everything is different. Going back to that same example, someone's on top of your partner choking them, all of the comments, why wouldn't you just shoot them? Why wouldn't you just kick them in the face? You could do all of those things, but why wouldn't you just shoot them? Well, there's a lot of, folks that work in corrections. They don't have a gun on them. They have OC, they have taser, maybe they have a baton, but the option to use deadly force, at least with a firearm, is not in their toolbox. So what other options do they have? What we showed was one of a lot, and how I learned one of a lot was through just consistent training. I started training jiu-jitsu in 2011, and through that time, I've learned a million different things that you can do from different positions. So, like, for example, if someone's on top of me like that, I know a lot of ways to get out of it. I know how to trap and roll. I know fundamental mount escapes. I know choke defense. I know punch defense. And it's not to say that, like, you have to train for 10 years to learn that stuff or be on the mat 7 days a week, but just by doing it consistently, you start to learn new tactics, new techniques, more options for different scenarios. And I think that doesn't get talked about enough. And, it just, this idea that, well, I'm legally authorized to use deadly force, therefore that's exactly what I would do. So a couple of other points on that same thing, for this idea that, well, if that happened to me, I'm going to react this specific way. Oh, if that ever happened, I would respond in this specific way. If you're honest with yourself, you might actually be surprised at how you would respond or how you would react to a situation that you've never been in before. And so just saying out loud, like, I would do this, I would do that. If you've never trained it, if you've never done scenario-based training, if you've never been in that particular situation, in a mat room where someone else is trying to impose their will on you, if you've never been in a boxing ring and been punched in the face or have someone throw punches at you to understand what that's like, you don't necessarily know how you're going to react. And I think there are a lot of people out there that work the street that obviously don't train and they have never been involved in any of those situations, yet they will still say things like, this is what I would do, this is how I would react. And I'm a big believer in, if you don't train it, you've never trained it, you will be shocked at how you respond to something. I was actually talking with this about one of my training partners at Jiu-Jitsu this morning, PJ, shout out PJ. And he said he read a book, I don't remember the name of it, but basically it was about the fight, flight, or freeze response to stress, right? Everyone's heard that in law enforcement circles. They preach that a lot in use of force training, but it's absolutely true. And I have a personal example from that. This was a long time ago, before I was a cop, before I started training jiu-jitsu. I think it was a long day. My grandmother had passed away. I was at her funeral. I had to go back to work after that. I don't know why I did, but I was working in the corporate world. So I went back to my stupid office job, and I leave end of the day, 5 o'clock, whatever, get in my shitty Jeep Grand Cherokee that I drove at the time. And I was driving home. I came up to a 4-way stop, look both ways, and I'm kind of out of it because, again, long day. I start to go, and there was a jogger, a runner that came out of nowhere and, like, hit the hood of my car. I didn't run him over now. So if they're watching, you can't sue me. But yeah, this person hit my car, and obviously it pissed him off and scared them a little bit. So it was a guy, another dude, and he's standing outside of my driver's side window screaming at me. He's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Pay attention. And I literally, like, I froze. I didn't know what to do. And it was really strange. It was the strangest feeling because before that, I was the person. I lifted heavy weights and I told everybody how tough I was and I'm a badass. And if anyone ever talks shit about me or to me and to my face, like, I'll fuck them up, blah, blah, all of that bullshit, right? But the reality of it is I had only been in like a couple of scraps, like maybe in college or high school, but it wasn't anything significant. And I didn't do any sort of training on a regular basis to be comfortable with violence or getting attacked or being in shitty positions or having people scream and yell in my face all day, which obviously if you're a cop, you're probably pretty comfortable with that if you've been a cop for a few years. But this particular incident was sort of like, I didn't know what to do. And I literally just like froze. I sat there and I stared at the guy as he like basically was just screaming at me through my window. And I remember one of the things he said, he goes, what do you want to, I think he thought I wanted to fight the way that I was like staring at him. He goes, what, do you want to get out of the fucking car? Let's go, blah, blah, blah. And in that moment I was like, fuck, do I want to get out of the car? Do I want to like get in a fight with this person? Or do I want to drive off and just like call it good? I was so like torn. I didn't know what to do. So I ended up, I was like, fuck it. I drove off. And it really bothered me. I was like, I can't just drive off. I have to go do something. So I ended up, long story short, I circled around. I found the guy. He was jogging. Don't worry, I didn't like get out and attack him. I rolled my window down because I had some time to take some deep breaths and like process what had happened. And I told the guy, I said, hey, you did give me a chance to apologize. I'm a runner too. You literally came out of nowhere. I did not see you and it was my fault and I'm sorry. And he actually was funny because he's like, dude, I'm sorry that I yelled too. He goes, I was just really scared. That's exactly what he said to me. I remember it. And that was like it was a big eye opener for me. And there's a lot more that could be like talked about in that particular incident. But the main point being, I thought I was a certain type of person and I thought I would respond in a certain type of way. And in that moment, because I didn't have any training to fall back on, all I did was talk and lift weights, and I was challenged and I didn't rise to the occasion. I fell back to my level of training, and we hear that a lot too. Now, as a Jiu Jitsu Black Belt, am I going to respond the same way that I did before? I probably would. I probably just drive off and be like, all right, yeah, fuck you. Sorry, didn't see you. I probably wouldn't circle back and apologize because all my emotions are now dead from having worked as a cop for over a decade. But the point being is you don't know how you're going to respond to something, and so saying it on the internet is one thing. Actually responding and doing it is another. And some people might respond a certain way. If you have training and you've been involved in those situations, or you've been involved in a lot of use of force situations, you might know exactly how you would respond. But saying that I would do this, saying you're legally authorized to do this, therefore you have to do it, is just, I don't think that's the right mentality. I think we have to think broader and we have to look at the bigger picture. And the other thing with that is, especially in today's day and age, with cops being sent to prison and being ridiculed and being under the microscope all the time for every single use of force scenario, it's no secret that everything you do on the street is on video. You have body cams. Everyone's always filming you all the time, especially if it's a use of force incident. And I always say, like, it shouldn't matter how it looks on camera. It really shouldn't. And when I started my career, we didn't really have to worry about that. I started in 2010. Body cameras were still kind of a new thing. We hadn't had them yet. We didn't really think about how things looked on camera. It was just sort of like, if we need to respond in this way, we will. But unfortunately, in today's day and age, I think cameras and being, recorded all the time does factor into it. And I think you also see a hesitation from cops in not doing things maybe that they should do, because of the fear of getting in trouble. And, that's not necessarily what this topic is about. And I will never say I have all the answers and this is what you should do and this is how you should act. That's not what this is about at all. I just really want to bring this idea, this topic too light in hopes that it helps you think a little bit more logically and on a broader scale as it relates to use of force. If you're getting yourself involved in situations like, what is the best outcome for everybody? So the video example that I showed, if someone's, you know, on top of your partner, two-handed choke, maybe the best outcome, depending on the totality of circumstances, is the use of deadly force. Absolutely. But maybe, just maybe, there are other options that you have available to you because you train on a regular basis where you don't have to use that high, the highest level of force, where the situation could have been avoided, you know, to begin with. And a couple of other things, just like long term, I think when people say, I would just, you know, I would just walk up and do a contact shot to the head. Again, let's think logically, okay? Number one, you don't have a great backdrop in that situation. If the fight's dynamic and your partner's on the ground rolling around with somebody, you're probably not going to want to just start cracking rounds off in their general direction. Call me crazy, but just one thought. The other thing, you know, that I saw was the use of strikes. So like knees, kicks. I would kick this guy in the face. Striking is an art as well. So let's not lose sight of that. When you see a really high level like boxer or Muay Thai fighter and they make it look easy, it's not because they're just naturally good at that stuff. Now, maybe some of them are, but they train it. Striking, punching, kicking, hitting people with elbows, that is an art form. That is a martial art that needs to be trained in order to do it well and do it effectively. So this idea that you could walk up and just kick somebody off of your partner, maybe, but hilariously enough, as a trainer for a lot of years, I've seen cops kick bags. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not making fun of anybody, but I am going to say out loud that not everybody can kick as hard as they think they can kick. And that was like not even wearing duty gear. If you're wearing 25 pounds of gear with heavy boots on and you think you've never kicked anything before, you don't train Muay Thai or whatever, and you think you're just going to be able to deliver a kick with significant force to have an impact on somebody, maybe you can, maybe. But how often do you train it? How good are you at striking? Oh, I would just deliver elbows. I would punch the guy in the face. Okay, cool. Again, it's an art. Striking is an art. How, you know, are you going to worry about breaking your hands if you punch someone in the face? That's another thing with strikes that doesn't get talked about enough. Other people said, you know, I would walk in and I would just, you know, apply a rear naked choke. Love it. As a jiu-jitsu guy, I love that answer. That's probably what I would do too. But again, are you in a good position? Position before submission. We talk about that all the time in jiu-jitsu. If someone's on top of your partner choking them, are you going to be able to establish a good back mount position from there to sink in a tight rear naked choke? Maybe, maybe not. Or you could tackle the person off and then start to set up dominant positions from there, which I showed in my video. I went to side control and then I showed how you can transition to knee on belly. A lot of things you can do. But I know to do those things because I have a background and that's what I do multiple days a week. And so just because you can, or just because you have the legal authority to use a particular level of force does not mean that you are legally required or obligated to use it. And then let's talk about the use of intermediate weapons in some of these situations. So let's say you're not going to use deadly force. Someone's on top of your partner. I'm just going back to this same scenario. Someone is on top of your partner choking them. You're not going to use deadly force, but you know, I saw responses of I would hit them with a baton. I would tase them. Again, not a great backdrop. There is a potential to tase your partner with a baton. I could, again, do probably an entire episode of why I think batons are complete trash and probably one of the most useless tools in policing, yet we still train with them and a lot of people are still required to carry them for some reason. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm right. You might disagree with that. Maybe use your baton all the time, but I've yet to talk to a cop that has used their baton to successfully beat someone into submission and get them under control. I think it's a useless tool. So that if you're going to introduce a baton in a situation where you're in close with somebody that doesn't care about taking it away from you and using it against you. I actually just saw a video of that today. It wasn't a cop, it was a security guard at McDonald's. I don't remember where it happened, but security guard gets into it with this guy. He's trying to remove him from the inside of the restaurant. And he ends up, he takes his baton on, he just starts like going to town on this guy's leg. It has no impact, no effect, which it usually doesn't. And now bad guy starts to wrestle the baton from the officer, security officer, takes it away from him, and now security officer's armed. He takes his gun out and he shoots the guy. So that turned into a deadly force situation. Should it have? I mean, probably. If someone has your baton and now they're going to try to attack you with it, deadly force again it's probably authorized and justified. But just because you're legally authorized doesn't mean you should or are obligated to. Situations like that can be avoided with better training, better tactics. And that's obviously, again, that guy was not a cop. But we see that in law enforcement all the time. There's tons of videos on the internet where, guys are pulling batons out and hitting people with it. It has zero impact or effect. And the, suspect takes the baton away. And now we've escalated this force. So the use of intermediate weapons are great. I'm not anti-taser. I am anti-baton. I'm not anti-taser. I'm not anti-OC. Those things have their place. They have value. But as we know, even though taser won't tell you this, they do fail probably more times than they work. There is a large failure rate. I don't know what the exact percentage is off the top of my head, but I'm just speaking from experience as someone who's been involved in a lot of situations on the street where we've tased people. They don't work that well. And with OC, obviously, again, big potential. If that's something that you're going to use in close quarters, if someone's fighting with your partner, you're going to spray them, you're going to spray yourself, you're going to spray the suspect. Everyone's going to get the cloud of OC, and it's just not worth it, in my opinion, in a lot of scenarios. And so intermediate weapons have their place, but again, going back to not having any training to fall back on, if you're just relying on those tools, most often they are going to escalate a situation. If you hit someone with a baton, it's going to piss them off and they're going to want to fight you. Think about it as just a general human being, a human person. If you get, you drink 16 Coors Lights at Buffalo Wild Wings and you get in a fight with somebody and the police show up and you're obviously out of control from all the Coors, and the cop whips his baton out and he starts hitting you in the leg with it or the rib cage or whatever. Are you going to go, oh God, you're right, I am going to comply? Thank you for using that phenomenal tactic on me. I give up and I'm going to comply. No, 100% no. If someone hit you with a baton, regardless of if you've had 16 Coors Lights or not, if you get hit with a metal stick, it's going to piss you off and you're probably you're going to want to fight. Same thing for strikes. If you punch someone in the face, human to human, they're probably going to want to fight you back. Not to say that you can't do it, not to say that you shouldn't do it. If you tase somebody, you see a million videos where guys get tased and they rip the wires out of their body, or one dart goes in, the other one misses, you don't get a good connection, you don't get NMI, and now that has failed. With any use of force that involves an intermediate weapon, you still have to go hands-on. So whether you tase someone, you spray someone, you hit them with a baton, you're eventually still going to have to go hands-on and get them controlled and get handcuffs on them at the end of the day. So those things have their place. And yes, I understand the comments about I would just use this, I would do this, I would do that. But again, thinking logically, then what? Ask yourself, then what? So I've used the taser. Okay, now what? I sprayed the person. Great. I soccer kicked the person in the face and they got off my partner. Cool. You've accomplished step one in that particular example scenario. Now what? You still have to go hands-on with the person. And so I guess the example that I showed with the arm bundle, which was one of many, it wasn't the only answer to the situation, so calm down. Um, that particular option was a step to getting control of the person. I already committed to grappling, um, bundled the arms, drove them off my partner. Now I'm on top in a good dominant position. Now, is that scenario going to change if my partner's unconscious? Absolutely. But again, in that video, I didn't spell out any of those things. I said I'm showing one solution of many to a question that came in from somebody online. That's all it was. So, and this video or podcast episode, if you will, is not, it's not to like defend that video. It's not to even really talk about that video. I'm just using that as an example because I think it sparked a little bit of debate, and it got me thinking about this topic and this idea of just being legally authorized to do something doesn't mean that you can or that you should. So think about that next time you're in a training environment and scenario-based training. Think about it when you are on the street. Like, what other options do I have available to me that might lead to a better outcome? You know, I've been involved in those situations where we could have used deadly force. We didn't, and I'm thankful that we didn't have to do that because we were able to figure out alternative solutions. You know, and that's not me saying like, oh yeah, I've been involved in so many situations. That's not what I'm doing. But I do remember, you know, there's a few different scenarios where we absolutely could have used deadly force, and we didn't. We found out other ways to deal with the situation. Leading back to the example of having different variables involved in totality of circumstances. One of the instances I remember that we were in was like a suicidal teenage female. She was cutting her wrist out on the balcony with a knife, and we get up to the balcony. She's standing there. I think there was like 3 or 4 of us there, all bigger, stronger guys, and she had a knife in her hand. Could she have attacked us with it? Absolutely. We ended up tasing her and basically just taking the knife out of her hand. Now, could that have gone a different direction? Absolutely. I'm glad it didn't. And everybody that was on that call understood that we can overpower this person, and we were comfortable enough going hands-on that we knew we didn't have to resort to deadly force or even a high level of force because it wasn't worth it. Legally, could we have? Probably. Doesn't mean we should have. Doesn't mean we had to. And that's one of a million examples, and I'm sure you have your own, especially if you've worked in a busy city and you go to a lot of calls and you've been in a lot of use of force situations. So I'm not telling you anything new. But again, I think the goal here is really just to like get all of us thinking a little bit broader and not be so quick to just say, this is exactly what I would do. Let's think a little bit more logically and just make each other better. So yeah, shout out to everybody who did leave a comment. Doesn't matter about, you know, this isn't about any of that. I don't care. I encourage comments on our page. My feelings will not get hurt if you comment on one of our videos, I promise. My feelings died a long time ago with the job. So I'm also a grown adult man, not fully grown because I'm only about 5'7", even though I tell people I'm 5'8". So I'm not a full grown man, but I am a grown up. I'm 44 years old, and I'm not going to be offended or hurt if you comment on our videos. I put that stuff out there to spark conversation, spark debate, and hopefully just give you some tools, things that you can use. That's what I'm all about. That is my mission with Jiu Jitsu 5-0, is to hopefully help you find new ways to keep yourself safe on the street, in hopes that you start training jiu-jitsu just to get all of the benefits out of it on and off the mats. So that's it for today. We'll catch you next time on another episode of On the Wall. And as always, please go check out our app, Jiu Jitsu 5-0. It's an online training platform that gives you access to high-level, high-quality jiu-jitsu training, really from anywhere that you are. You can access it via mobile device or computer, get technique videos, learn new stuff for the street, get grappling-based workouts to improve your fight fitness, and a whole lot of other training content. And we'd love for you to check it out, join our squad, and train with us from wherever you are. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Go train Woof.